A sergeant major dismisses her as the NATO Translator. That's the line I'm drawing. Get this woman out of here, now. Translator desk is across the cantonment in Tent Charlie. Stay there until we call you. NATO COMSEC briefings are not for contractors. The voice came out of the open flap of a 6x10 combined joint special operations briefing tent at 0946 on a Tuesday morning in eastern Latvia. The wind off the spruce line was steady at 14 knots. The cantonment was a grid of shipping containers and tents on the cold opening week of an enhanced forward presence deterrence rotation. A coalition flag rack stood at the duckboard entrance. Stars and stripes. The German tricolor. The White Eagle of Poland. The Union Jack. 4 others. The man in the flap was United States Army Sergeant Major Carter Burroughs, 48 years old. J3 Operations, NCOIC, mid-stride, holding a contractor-style laminated credential lanyard in his right hand. He believed he was protecting OPSEC. He believed it sincerely. The woman the lanyard had belonged to was Lieutenant Colonel Mia Lindqvist, United States Army, 5th Special Forces Group, Airborne. No insignia on her person would have told him that. She was 41. Brunette. Hair pulled back tight in a regulation bun. She wore plain coalition pattern utilities. No rank tabs, no unit flash, no flag. The credential clipped at her second buttonhole had read, Interpreter. Civ, Ronaldo Bubububzuma PL3T. She had not introduced herself by rank. The cover was authorized. The cover was on procedure. He did not know who he was speaking to. Almost no one in the cantonment did. She did not move. Burroughs walked the wooden duckboards down toward her. He removed the lanyard from her neck himself. He folded it once. He folded it twice. He pushed it into his cargo pocket. He turned to the Polish enlisted gate guard standing at parade rest at the corner of the planning tent. Civilians do not sit at the planning table, he said in slow English. I do not care which agency cut your paperwork. We are in Lithuania line posture as of 0700, and you are not cleared for this brief. She held his eyes for one count. Eastern Latvia, she said. He blinked. Excuse me. We are not in Lithuania. The Lithuanian line is 240 kilometers south. He stared at her for one full second. He decided she was correcting his geography to be difficult. He turned and walked back inside. Inside the tent, at a standing desk by the planning map, Polish land forces, Captain Mateusz Sobolewski, 35 J2 liaison, had seen the credential pull through the open flap. He did not change his expression. He did not put down the wireless headset he was wearing. He reached one hand to his thigh pocket and withdrew a small green moleskin. He wrote one line in Polish, in tight, neat letters, without looking down at the page. North wind. Here. Today. The sergeant major does not know. He pocketed the notebook again. He kept his face entirely still. He had been on the Polish Grom side of a network exfil across the eastern border in late October 2023, and he understood, completely, in roughly 2 seconds, what was about to happen inside the next 90 minutes of bureaucratic time. Outside, Lindqvist crossed the wooden duckboards from the planning tent flap to a small, unheated waiting area 20 meters back. 2 folding chairs, a plywood table, a tarp lean-to. The Polish enlisted gate guard followed her with his eyes, but did not move from his post. She did not sit. She crossed her arms at the elbows, weight even through both feet. Watch face turned to the inside of her left wrist. The wind came off the spruce line at a steady 14 knots. She breathed a 3 count. She did not check the time more than once every 11 minutes. Patience was not a virtue in her profession. It was the entire profession. At 0953, the planning brief began without her. The voice of Oberst Magnus Kuhler of the German Army, EFP Battle Group Commander, 53, carried faintly through the tent canvas. Clipped accented English, briefing the rotation's posture. The Polish junior radio operator was at the J2 monitoring board. United States Army Captain Hollis Wynne, 28, J3 staff, was at the row of laminate planning tables with his hand flat on a printed manifest. Wynne scanned the manifest at 0955. He found the line, Lindqvist, M. Intul, Acht, CJSOC. He hesitated for 1/2 second. He looked up at Burroughs. Burroughs was at the map pointer. Burroughs was a sergeant major running the cell. Wynne was a captain, 2 pay grades junior at this desk, 3 weeks into his first multinational rotation. He folded the manifest twice. He slipped it under his green planner where Burroughs would not see it. He said nothing. Outside the tent, Lindqvist's breath fogged once. The 40 minutes passed. At 10:29, the FM net on the J2 monitoring board went hot. It was not loud. It was a thin, steady carrier underneath a Russian-language transmission that should not have been there. The Polish junior radio operator, Sergeant Wiktor Maleszka, 23, 3 months out of the Wrocław Signal School, listened for 19 seconds, blinked twice, and removed the headset. The contracted civilian interpreter, assigned to the J2 cell, was 12 kilometers away at the cantonment's language office. The contracted civilian interpreter was always 12 kilometers away. United States Army Sergeant Marcos Halliburton, 26, J3 cell, ducked his head out of the planning tent flap and asked the Polish gate guard for a Russian speaker. The Polish enlisted pointed at the lean-to. Halliburton swore once under his breath. He went back inside. He came back out with a Polish staff sergeant. The Polish staff sergeant also pointed at the lean-to. Halliburton walked the duckboards. He did not meet Lindqvist's eyes. Sergeant Major says contractors only step inside if we ask, he said. We are asking. Russian, Estonian, anything northern. Can you? Yes, she said. He motioned her in. Inside the tent, the FM transmission was still running on the monitoring board. Maleszka handed her the headset without ceremony. She did not sit. She did not nod. She slid the cup of one ear under the strap and listened. Her right hand opened the contractor notebook on the laminate to the first blank page. The pen returned to the same canted angle on the laminate after every line. 19 seconds. She wrote 3 lines. She handed the notebook to Maleszka. He is using the wrong dual-use call sign for a Belarusian fuel detachment, she said in fluent Polish. Quiet. No tonal performance. The voice is Northern Russian, not Belarusian. The breath pattern is from inside a tracked vehicle, not a wheeled one. He thinks we will hear it as friendly. Maleszka's face changed. Oberst Köhler, at the planning map, turned at the sound of Polish in his briefing tent. Lindqvist turned with him. She did not wait to be presented. Herr Oberst, she said in flawless German. Clipped. Technical. Die Aufklärung ist gefälscht. Ein nordrussischer Sprecher in einem Kettenfahrzeug, der eine weißrussische Treibstoffkennung verwendet. Wahrscheinlich Vorbereitung einer Querbewegung östlich der Linie. Empfehlung: Brigade S2 alarmieren. Sammelauftrag in der nächsten Stunde. The Oberst put down the map pointer. She turned to Captain Wynne. She did not change her cadence. The Oberst followed her with his eyes, the way a man who has been a battalion commander twice follows a senior intelligence officer he has not been briefed on. He did not interrupt. He waited for her to finish translating for the American side of the table before he asked the obvious operational question. Captain, she said in mid-Atlantic English, the implication is a probable cross-line preparatory shift. Recommend you flag this for your brigade liaison and stand up a 72-hour collection requirement. There is one previous instance in November 2023. The signature is the same. The window from indicator to action in 2023 was 11 days. We are now between days 6 and 9. She turned back to Maleszka. Tell the brigade what I told you, she said in Polish. Use my exact phrasing. They will know the indicator. 91 seconds. from the moment she put the headset on. She did not raise her voice once. Wynne said it to himself, very quietly, the words moving his lips and barely making air. "That is not an interpreter." Burroughs was leaning against the planning map, arms folded across his chest. He had watched the entire 91 seconds. He had heard the Polish, then the German, then the English. He had registered that the Oberst had set down the map pointer. He had registered that Wynne's posture had changed. He decided, with sincere conviction, that this was a contractor who had studied at the Defense Language Institute and was showing off because she had been pulled in front of a German Oberst and a British liaison was inbound. He did not feel embarrassed. He felt confirmed in his earlier judgment. He bent his head to Wynne. He kept his voice low enough that the Oberst at the planning map could not pick up the words across the 4 meters of canvas quiet air between them. "She is a contractor, sir," he said low. "She is doing exactly what contractors do. They go to language school. They get 1 hot transmission a year that lets them show off in 3 languages, and they ride that performance for the rest of the rotation. I have seen it on 6 rotations. We will manage this." "Sergeant Major." "Sir." Wynne closed his mouth. The folded manifest under his green planner had a weight to it that he could feel through the canvas of his blouse. Lindqvist handed the headset back to Maleska. She did not wait to be told to leave. She walked the duckboards back to the lean-to with the same posture she had walked in with. Weight even through both feet. Watch face inside the wrist. The Polish radio operator followed her with his eyes the whole way. At the J2 standing desk, Sobolewski wrote a second line in his green notebook. Niemiecki, polski, angielski. W 91 sekund. Nie podniosła głosu. German, Polish, English. In 91 seconds. She did not raise her voice. Outside, the wind came off the spruce line again. Lindqvist crossed her arms at the elbows. She did not check the time at all that hour. By noon, the J3 cell had decided collectively that Lindqvist was a problem contractor. That was the word they used. Problem. Not threat. Not asset. Problem. The distinction mattered. The distinction was the entire shape of the next 4 hours. Burroughs took the credential lanyard out of his cargo pocket at 11:52, walked it across the cantonment to the contracted linguist roster desk himself, and logged it as a Tier 3 credential. Tier 3 was the lowest tier. It restricted her to translator support inside Tent Charlie, with no operational access. He printed 2 copies of the reclassification notation. He posted one inside the contracting office. He walked the second across the cantonment and tacked it to the outside notice board of the planning tent, where every gate guard and runner would see it. The posting named her by surname. He believed he was doing this by the book. He was, in fact, doing it by the book. The book was for someone else. At 12:04, Halliburton opened a 5-person group chat on the cantonment WhatsApp. 3 Army J3 enlisted, 1 Polish gate guard. He named the chat The Volunteer. He sent a photograph of Lindqvist standing in the lean-to. The photograph had been taken from inside the planning tent through the open flap. She had not seen him take it. Halliburton sent a joke about the cold. The joke was not creative. The joke was the kind of joke a 26-year-old American sergeant who had grown up watching reality television sent to 4 other 20-something-year-old enlisted because he had been pulled in front of a sergeant major he respected and embarrassed by a woman in a lean-to who he had been ordered to think of as less than him. The Polish gate guard did not respond. Corporal Wonsik had read the chat name. He had read the joke. He had set his own personal phone face down on the bench inside the gate guard's tent, so he would not be tempted to read the rest. The 3 Army enlisted did respond. 2 of them sent variations of Halliburton's joke. The third, a specialist named Laura Pendry, 20, 2 months in country on her first deployment, typed half a sentence, deleted it, then closed the chat without sending anything. She did not unmute the chat for the rest of the day. Sobolewski left the planning tent at 12:07 to bring Halliburton a printed manifest. He arrived at Halliburton's standing desk just as Halliburton was thumbing a second joke into the chat. He saw the photograph open on Halliburton's screen over Halliburton's left shoulder. He saw the chat name. He read the second joke as Halliburton sent it. He did not say anything. He placed the printed manifest on the standing desk. He turned. He walked back to his own J2 standing desk. He took out the green moleskin. He wrote a third line. J3 mocking. Sergeant Mai posted her W Tier 3. Wciążenie mówią. J3 mocking. The Sergeant Major has posted her in Tier 3. They are still talking about her. In the lean-to, Lindqvist returned to her own notebook. She opened it to the second blank page. She wrote a single column. Time. Name. Action. Pencil. No flourish. 0946. Burroughs. Credential pull and ejection. 1029. Halliburton. Recall for translation. 1152. Burroughs. Tier 3 reclassification. Public posting. 1204. Halliburton. Photograph without consent. WhatsApp group The Volunteer. She closed the notebook. She tucked it into the thigh pocket of her utilities. She did not look at the planning tent. She was not building a complaint. She was building a record. Records were quieter than complaints. They were also harder to ignore later. A complaint required two parties and a forum. A record required one person and a pencil. She had been keeping records since 2010 in an OD green notebook in a tactical HUMINT team in eastern Afghanistan, and she had filed exactly 2 complaints in 16 years and won both of them on the first reading because the records had already done the work. The temperature dropped 2 degrees in the afternoon. The lean-to remained unheated. She crossed her arms at the elbows. She breathed a 3 count. She did not check the time. At 12:31, the Polish enlisted gate guard, Corporal Tomasz Wąsik, 24 months in country, walked a paper cup of black coffee across the duckboards and set it on the plywood table inside the lean-to. He did not speak. He returned to his post. She accepted the coffee with one nod. The cup was warm through the thin recycled cardboard. She held it in both hands for one breath. She set it down on the plywood table before she took her first drink, the way she had been taught to set down warm things by a master sergeant from Bemidji, Minnesota, whose face she did not let herself see right now. Burroughs saw the cup exchange through the planning tent flap. He decided the Polish gate guard was being soft. He made a note to discipline him in the after-action. He did not write the note down. The note remained in the chamber of his head where junior corrections lived. If you are watching this, and you have ever been written off by people who should have done 30 seconds of homework first, you already know how this part of the story goes. Stay with her. The room will fix itself before sundown. And if you want to see the rest of the way through, subscribe to Honor Tales. There are stories on this channel that need to be heard, and this one is only halfway told. At 1400, Burroughs sat at his standing desk with a binder open and a templated form pulled out flat. Contractor Conduct Note. Form J3-417-B. Cantonment Contracting Office Routing. He filled it in by hand in blue ballpoint pen. Contractor, Tier 3. Scope violation. Unauthorized operational engagement during J2 monitoring at 10:29. Recommendation, removal from manifest. He signed it on the bottom line. He placed it in the contracting officer's outbound tray. In normal circumstances, the form would take her off the manifest by tomorrow morning. In normal circumstances, the contracting officer's representative would countersign by 1600. The cantonment's command sergeant major would initial by 1700. The gate guards would receive the updated manifest on the 0500 shift change, and the contractor in question would be walked across the cantonment to the language office at 0700 and told to wait in Tent Charlie until her replacement was found. The form had a path. The path was 18 hours. Captain Hollis Wynne picked it up at 14:06 on his afternoon courier run. He recognized the recommendation. He recognized the form. He did not put the form back. He carried it across the cantonment to the contract management container, where the contracting officer's representative, Caprice Holdcroft, 44, a United States civilian, 12 years in coalition contracting, was at her own desk reviewing a separate stack of fuel manifests. He set the contractor conduct note on her desk. He held one finger on it. "Caprice," he said quietly. "Before you action this, that name on the form. Lindqvist, M. Pull her real file. Not the contractor file. Her real file. Before you sign anything off." Holdcroft looked up. "Captain, she is on the contracted linguist roster. There is no real file." "I am asking you. Please." She studied his face for one count. "I will hold it 24 hours, she said. Wynne nodded. He walked out. He did not thank her. Thanking her would have been a fourth person in the room. The conversation had been between two, and was now over. In the contract management container, Holdcroft turned the form face down on her desk and slid it under a second stack of fuel manifests. She did not look at it for the rest of the afternoon. She did not need to. Outside in the lean-to, Lindqvist took a non-secure personal phone from her cargo pocket and dialed home. The phone connected on the third ring. Britta Lindqvist, 15, in a kitchen at a kitchen table in central North Carolina, 6 time zones west, picked up on her lunch break with the radio on low in the background. The call lasted 4 minutes. They talked about Britta's Algebra 2 quiz. They talked about the school play on Friday. Britta had a small speaking part, 2 pages, and she was nervous about the second page. They talked about the weather. They didn't talk about Mia's work. They never did. They had agreed on this when Britta was 9, and her mother had become primary parent. At the end of the call, Britta said she loved her. Mia said it back. She ended the call. She returned the phone to her cargo pocket. She breathed a 3 count. Corporal Wonsik at the duck boards saw her face. He did not say anything to her about the cold. He had a younger sister at home in Krakow. She was 14. He had heard a 15-year-old American girl on the line the same way he had heard his sister at 14. Quick, kind, tired around the edges, holding her mother together by holding the conversation between safe walls. He turned his face away so the woman in the lean-to would not have to register that he had heard any of it. At 14:17, Sobolevsky left the planning tent on a printer supply errand. He walked past the lean-to. He did not stop. As he passed, he said one short sentence in Polish, in a voice she could hear and no one else could. Brigadier Pendlebury ląduje o 15. Będzie w namiocie do 15:30. Nie wie, że pani tu jest. Brigadier Pendlebury lands at 1500. He will be in the tent by 15:30. He does not know you are out here. She answered in the same voice, in the same Polish, without turning her head. Niech jeszcze nie wie. Don't tell him yet. Tak jest, pani pułkownik. Understood, ma'am. He kept walking. Back inside the planning tent, Burroughs briefed the next 24 hours perimeter rotations to the J3 cell. The conduct note was in the outbound tray. Halliburton was on the WhatsApp again. Wynne was back at his desk. Burroughs felt, sincerely, that the morning had been a good morning of operational hygiene. He did not look toward the lean-to. In the lean-to, Lindqvist opened her contractor notebook a final time. She added one line in pencil. 14:10. Burroughs, contractor conduct. Note filed. Scope violation grounds. Holdcroft, holding 24 hours. She closed it. She tucked it back into her cargo pocket. The wind came off the spruce line at a steady 11 knots now. At 14:41, Wynne walked across the cantonment to Sobolevsky's J2 standing desk. It was 140 meters across cold gravel and one set of duck boards. He walked it with the folded manifest pressed flat against his chest under his blouse. He passed the lean-to. He did not look at it. He had been told by every senior officer he respected that the difference between a captain who became a major and a captain who became a civilian was the ability to tell when a senior NCO was wrong without saying so out loud. He believed that. He still believed it as he reached Sobolewski's door. The belief did not make the walk any shorter. He waited behind the Polish captain until Sobolewski finished a Polish-language radio check with the Brigade S2. Then he spoke low. "Captain, off the record." "Off the record, Captain. She is not a contracted linguist." "No." "Why is no one saying so?" Sobolewski did not look at him. He looked at the planning map on the wall, where the eastern line ran in red grease pencil. "She does not want anyone to," he said. "She has her reasons. They are good reasons. And the situation will resolve itself at 15:30. Stand down. Brief the rotations." Wynne started to walk away. He turned back at the doorway between the J2 alcove and the main planning floor. "Captain, will you tell me one thing, so I can sleep tonight? One thing. Has she done this work before?" Sobolewski put down his pen. He set both hands flat on the standing desk. He still did not look at Wynne. "She ran the network for the November 2023 exfil, the one your defense attaché doesn't have a name for yet because it is still in the classified summary. I was on the Polish side. Brigadier Pendlebury was on the British side. She was the senior intelligence officer." He turned back to the planning map. "Walk back to your desk, Captain. Brief the rotations." Wynne breathed out once. He walked back to his desk. The 140 meters were shorter the second time. The folded manifest under his blouse was lighter the second time. He understood completely that he had been given a small mercy by a Polish captain who had no obligation to give it to him, and that the mercy was the answer to a question he had not been allowed to ask out loud. Burroughs had been at the standing desk reviewing the perimeter rotations binder. He saw Wynne come back in. He saw Wynne's posture. He decided Wynne was intimidated by the German Oberst's presence in the tent and by the inbound British brigadier, and was overcompensating. He did not ask Wynne anything. Halliburton looked up at Wynne. Halliburton's WhatsApp screen was still open on his phone. Wynne did not look at him. In the lean-to, the wind had dropped. Corporal Wonsik, on his own initiative, had brought Lindqvist a second cup of coffee. She had accepted it with a single nod. She had not asked his name. She had not asked anyone for anything since 0946. She was reading a small Estonian language paperback she had folded into her thigh pocket at 0500. The book was a slim novel by a writer from Tartu about a woman who had been a translator in the 1960s for visiting Soviet engineers and had outlived all 3 husbands and 2 children and become, at 71, the unofficial keeper of a small parish cemetery on the Russian border. She turned one page every 4 minutes. Her watch was on the inside of her left wrist. She did not look at it. The keeper of the cemetery in the novel said, on page 82, that the trick to keeping a cemetery clean was to come every morning, whether anyone was coming to visit or not. Lindqvist read the line twice. She did not underline it. She did not need to. She had been doing the same job in a different uniform for 16 years. The Wildcat helicopter was inbound, a United Kingdom UK Wildcat HMA-2, doing a coalition liaison run from the maritime detachment at the coast. Sobolewski heard the rotor wash through the open flap at 1512. He folded the green moleskin and tucked it into his blouse pocket. He did not look at the lean-to. He looked at Burroughs. He waited. There is a kind of confidence that comes from rank, and a kind that comes from knowing what the rank is for. Sergeant Major Burroughs had the first kind. The woman in the lean-to had the second. The brigadier landing in the next 18 minutes would be the only one in the room who had met both kinds of women in this exact configuration before and lived to brief about it. If you want to be in the tent when he walks in, subscribe. We are 17 minutes from the door. She closed the Estonian paperback at 15:03. She breathed a 3-count. The rotor wash of the inbound Wildcat was loud enough now to feel through the boards of the lean-to. She closed her eyes. The flashback opened against the inside of her eyelids the way operational memory opens. Not as a story, but as a list of physical facts. She did not perform the memory. The narration carried it. She had run that network for 11 months. She had not slept more than 4 hours in a row for the last 19 days of it. She had not been afraid until the exfil bird was late. The brief had been in late October 2023. A skiff in a partner nation's Eastern Theater. Name redacted, location elliptical, fluorescent lighting, a whiteboard with grease pencil arrows that did not match any official map. She was 38. Plain coalition utilities. Across from her, Colonel Hugh Pendlebury, United Kingdom Special Air Service, 50 in 2023, plain coalition utilities. Beside her, Master Sergeant Soren Bjornstad, United States Army Special Forces, call sign frame, 34, plain coalition utilities, jaw scar from a 2014 deployment. On a side table, a Polish Grom detachment commander, name held back even from her own notes. Pendlebury had spoken first. If your asset's daughter comes across the line as anything other than asleep in the back of that vehicle, this becomes an incident. Do you understand? I understand. Then run it. 3 nights later, she was driving a borrowed civilian Lada with the back seats folded flat. Dr. Yulia Voronova, Russian dissident technical specialist, 47 in 2023, was in the front passenger seat. Voronova's son, 17, was asleep in the back of the Lada with a wool blanket and a thermos of warm tea. The thermos was important. It had been her idea. A sleeping teenager with a thermos at a border crossing read as a sleeping teenager with a thermos. Bjornstad was behind a fold of tree line 200 meters east of the creek crossing, covering the access road. He was a master sergeant in a special forces team in a partner nation's spruce line on a moonless night, and he was, that night, the most reliable man on the continent. The exfil bird was 40 seconds late. 40 seconds was the entire story. In the 40 seconds, a quick reaction patrol from the wrong country came down the access road. 2 vehicles, headlights off. Engine signature on Bjornstad's monitor at 390 meters. He read it in 3 seconds. He took the lead vehicle out at 390 meters with a single sustained burst from the position he had been holding for 9.5 hours. He gave Lindqvist exactly the window she needed to put the Lada across the creek. He was still working the tree line when the second vehicle found his position by the muzzle flash. He did not panic. He did not break protocol. He covered them out by 21 seconds. Lindqvist heard the last sequence on his short-burst radio. She did not turn the Lada around. She did not stop. She did not cry. She did her job. She got Dr. Voronova and the boy across the line and into the back of the exfil bird that had finally landed at the next clearing. Frame's last word on the net was, clear. He had meant, clear, you are clear. Do not turn around. Drive. He was recovered 3 days later by a Polish Grom element under Captain Sobolewski. Body recovered. Identified. Returned to his family in Bemidji, Minnesota. KIA. Confirmed. The ceremony at the airfield, the casket draped, the bagpipes from a Royal Air Force liaison, the slow walk down the ramp. She had been there. She had not cried then either. She received the Defense Superior Service Medal at a private ceremony 2 months later in a closed building in Tampa, Florida. The medal was on a thin red, white, and blue moiré ribbon at the throat. 2 hands lowered the ribbon from above. The 2 hands were gloved. She did not display the medal afterward. She did not put it in a case. She put it in the felt-lined drawer of a dresser at the back of a closet in central North Carolina. She was awarded the operational call sign North Wind that same week. The line item was unwritten. The same people who had handed her the medal handed her the call sign. They told her, plainly, that the network she had run was the highest yield human pipeline NATO had operated since 2008, and that she should expect to be asked to run another one inside 3 years. She had nodded once. She had not said anything. In the lean-to, present day, she opened her eyes. She breathed a 3 count. The rotor wash of the UK Wildcat was settling. 1526. The Brigadier was 4 minutes from the tent flap. While she had been inside the skiff in 2023, Sobolewski had walked from the J2 standing desk to the J2 supply container, carried a folding chair across the cantonment without speaking, set it down inside the lean-to, and walked back to the planning tent. She had nodded once when he set the chair down. She was sitting now. Weight even through both feet planted on either side of the chair. Watch face inside the wrist. Contractor notebook closed on her lap. The Estonian paperback flat on the plywood table. 1520. Burroughs walked out of the planning tent to check that his contractor was still where he had put her. He saw the folding chair. He stopped walking for 1 count. He kept walking. "Where did you get the chair, Captain?" She did not answer. "I asked you where you got the chair." "From the J2 supply container," she said. "Captain Sobolewski walked it over. He is the J2 liaison. Stand up, now." Sobolewski had followed Burroughs out the tent flap at 20 paces. He stopped at the edge of the duckboards. "Sergeant Major, the chair was placed on J2 authority. It will remain." Burroughs turned. He did not raise his voice. He spoke with sincere authority. "Captain Sobolewski, this is a United States-led cell, in a United States coordinated brief. It is a NATO-led cell. Oberst Kuhler is German. The Brigadier inbound is British. The senior intelligence officer attached to the rotation is Sergeant Major Carter Burroughs is the senior intelligence officer attached to this rotation on the J3 side. Sergeant Major Burroughs is the J3 Operations NCOIC. Captain, mind your own service. Move along." Burroughs said it the way an American sergeant major says move along to a captain of a small ally on a wooden duckboard between 2 tents. He did not understand, even now, that the small ally was the country whose spruce line he could see from his standing desk every morning at 0700, and that the small ally's J2 captain had stood at one end of an exfil corridor in late October 2023 and held a radio for 14 hours, waiting for an American master sergeant to come back out, and that the American master sergeant had not come back out, and that the woman in the folding chair he had just ordered to stand had run the network the master sergeant had died covering. Sobolewski did not move along. He held Burroughs' eyes for 1 count. He inclined his head a precise 2 degrees. He turned. He walked back to the planning tent flap. He did not look at Lindqvist. He did not need to. Lindqvist did not stand up from the chair. She crossed her arms at the elbows. Wait even. Watch face inside the wrist. When Burroughs turned back to her, she gave him a single small smile. Closed mouth. No warmth. No edge. The smile of a professional who had already won and was letting the loser finish his sentence. He saw the smile. He read it as contempt. He noted it. He turned and walked back into the tent. He did not order Sobolewski again. Inside, he took the contractor conduct note out of the outbound tray. He added 1 sentence in pen at the bottom margin. Contractor displayed insolent effect toward NCO in front of Allied officer. Recommend immediate termination of contracted access. He put the form back. He believed sincerely that he had just documented professional conduct. The form was, in fact, written evidence that he had overridden an Allied officer's authority on the basis of a bias he had carried into the tent at 0700. Wynne saw the addition over Burroughs' shoulder as he walked past on his way to the flap. Wynne did not say anything. He walked straight out the flap and toward the helo pad, where the Wildcat was settling on its skids. The rotor wash flattened the grass for 30 meters around the pad. The crew chief stepped down. The aircraft commander stepped down. The fourth man down was United Kingdom Army Brigadier Hugh Pendlebury, 52, in plain coalition utilities, beret folded under his left arm, manifest clipboard in his right hand. In the lean-to, Lindqvist heard the engine note drop. She closed her eyes for a 1 count. She breathed a 3 count. She was, for the first time in 8 hours, exactly where she needed to be. He walked the duck boards. He did not hurry. He read the manifest as he walked. He was talking to himself in clipped low English, the way a man with 30 years on him talks to a manifest he has already half memorized. The Polish enlisted gate guard came to attention as he approached. Pendlebury returned the salute without breaking stride. The brigadier's hands were old hands, brown and creased from sun and wind across 3 continents and 4 decades, and the manifest clipboard sat in his right hand, the way a man holds a thing he has held 10,000 times. He had been a lieutenant in the Falklands. He had been a major in Sierra Leone. He had been a colonel for the long stretch, and he had been a brigadier for 2.5 years. He got to the line Lindqvist, Mapo, interpreter, Sive at the 3rd row from the bottom. His head came up. He stopped walking. He scanned the cantonment without moving his shoulders. He saw the lean-to. He saw the woman in plain utilities in the folding chair. He removed his beret. He folded it under his left arm. He walked the 20 paces back across the duck boards without hurry. He stopped 1 meter from the chair. He did not salute. He inclined his head a precise 3 degrees. "Colonel Lindqvist," he said. Conversational volume, no flourish. "They told me you were already inside. Apologies. We seem to have had a small administrative misunderstanding. Would you do me the courtesy of joining the planning brief?" "Brigadier." "I have your seat, ma'am. Please." He gestured her in front of him. She closed her contractor notebook. She stood. She did not pat herself down. She did not adjust the badge clip at her second buttonhole. The badge clip was no longer on the second buttonhole. Burroughs had folded the lanyard into his cargo pocket 8 hours earlier. She walked the duck boards at Pendlebury's left elbow, 1/2 step ahead. Sobolewski saw her cross the threshold of the planning tent flap. He stood. Oberst Kuhler, mid-sentence at the planning map, sees her face. He stopped mid-sentence. He set down the map pointer. He stood. Sergeant Maleshka at the J2 monitoring board stood. Captain Wynne stood. Sergeant Halliburton stood, 1/2 second late, because Halliburton's brain caught up 1/2 second after everyone else's. Burroughs was at the standing desk. He had the perimeter rotations binder open under his right palm. He saw Lindqvist enter at Pendlebury's elbow. He registered the rank Pendlebury had just used. He registered the Oberst standing. He registered Sobolewski standing. He registered Wynne standing. His face cycled in the order the audience by now had been trained to expect, across roughly 4.5 seconds. Confusion. Disbelief. Recognition. Horror. He did not say anything. The binder closed itself against his thumb. He did not move it. Pendlebury walked her to the head of the planning table opposite Oberst Kuhler. He addressed the room. For the room. Lieutenant Colonel Mia Lindqvist, United States Army. 5th Special Forces Group, Airborne. Attached to Combined Joint Special Operations Component as Senior Intelligence Officer for this rotation. Operational call sign of record is on my brief. Some of you have worked with the Colonel before. The rest of you will this week. Köhler exhaled through his nose. He spoke very quietly, in German, to himself. Ach so. Sobolewski, just audible, in Polish. Tak jest, sir. Pendlebury turned to the standing desk. Sergeant Major Burroughs. Sir. Step outside with me when the brief concludes, not before. Take your station. The Colonel will resume the J2 monitoring section. Yes, sir. Pendlebury did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The room had already done the work for him. He was the only man in the tent old enough to have stood in the room when the United Kingdom and the United States had both been told, in a closed meeting in late January 2024, that the November exfil had been the highest yield single human lift either service had executed on the continent since the late 80s. He was the only man in the tent who had been on the other side of that meeting. He had a particular grief about a master sergeant from Bemidji, Minnesota, that he carried under his blouse, the way another man carries a wedding ring. He did not show it. He did not need to. Lindqvist nodded once, to the room. No smile. Let's continue. The tent was still for 1 beat longer. The wind was still outside. The rotor wash had cycled down to a long, settling whine. Halliburton's hand was shaking slightly on the binder he was holding. Wynn's hand was steady. Burroughs's hands were folded at the small of his back, the way an NCO folds his hands when he has been told to remain at his station and remain useful and remain quiet. Lindqvist took 1 breath. 3 count. She picked up the map pointer from where Köhler had set it down. She walked to the J2 monitoring section of the planning map. She began the section in mid-Atlantic English without any reference to the last 8 hours. She ran the J2 monitoring section for 41 minutes. She presented the Belarusian fuel detachment spoofing transmission as a known indicator. She walked the room through 3 previous instances she had personally seen, with dates, theaters, and outcomes. She gave the cell a 1-page collection requirement for the next 72 hours. She did not look at Burroughs once during the section. Köhler nodded her work twice. Pendlebury asked 1 clarifying question about the November 2023 signature, and she answered it in 1 sentence. The brief closed at 16:17. Pendlebury walked Burroughs from the planning tent across the duckboards to Oberst Köhler's command container. The door closed behind them. The conversation inside was short. It was not theatrical. Köhler told Burroughs, in clipped, accented English, that he was writing him a letter of counseling for failure to validate a coalition manifest before exercising administrative authority over a flag-cleared officer of an Allied service. He told him further that the colonel had been consulted and had declined to escalate beyond the letter. He told him further that the rotation could not afford to lose its J3 NCOIC mid-cycle, that the letter was therefore corrective rather than punitive, and that Burroughs was expected to remain in the chair and conduct himself with appropriate professional humility for the remaining 6 weeks. You will sit down. You will read this letter. You will sign it. You will return to your desk. You will be at the morning brief at 0700 tomorrow. You will brief Lieutenant Colonel Lindqvist on the perimeter rotations. You will do this for the next 6 weeks. Am I clear, Sergeant Major? Clear, sir. Dismissed. Caprice Holdcroft, the contracting officer's representative, walked the original contractor conduct note across the cantonment to her own desk at 1631. She placed it in her shredder herself. She watched it shred. She also walked across to the planning tent's outside notice board, removed the printed Tier 3 reclassification posting that Burroughs had tacked there at 11:52, folded it twice, and shredded that on the same machine. She did not file a parallel notation in her own system. Wynne saw her do this from across the cantonment. He gave her a single nod. She returned it. At 17:04, Halliburton was brought into the small office at the back of the planning tent by Burroughs himself. Burroughs had been told by Köhler that he was responsible for the correction. He did not perform the correction. He delivered it. The WhatsApp group is closed before 2100. Any reference to the volunteer on any device, in any channel, in any after-action, results in your removal from the rotation. The colonel is not to be discussed casually. I'm saying this because I was told to. I'm also saying it because I understand now that I was wrong, and that you were wrong Because I gave you permission to be wrong. Am I clear, Sergeant? Halliburton swallowed once. Yes, Sergeant Major. Close the chat. Now. Halliburton thumbed the WhatsApp open. He archived the chat. He cleared the photograph. He deleted the chat. He showed Burroughs the empty screen. Dismissed. At 17:02, Lindqvist found Sobolewski at the J2 standing desk. She spoke in Polish. Low. Dziękuję za krzesło. Thank you for the chair. It was a folding chair, ma'am. It was an act of Allied courtesy. I will remember it. Tak jest, pani pułkownik. Yes, ma'am, Colonel. If you stayed with the woman in the lean-to through 8 hours of bureaucratic cold, this part is for you. The system did not destroy itself today. It was given a letter of counseling and told to stay at its post. Sometimes the reckoning is quiet. Sometimes the punishment is being made to work under the person you wrote off. If you want more stories like this one, where the woman the room overlooked turns out to outrank the room, subscribe to Honor Tales. There are more. They are coming. The planning tent was dark by 2300, except for a single map light at the back. The cantonment outside was quiet. The wind had dropped off the spruce line entirely. The flags on the coalition rack at the entrance moved only enough to remind anyone watching that they were still there. Lindqvist was at a folding chair at the back of the tent. The SAT phone was at her left ear. Her daughter Britta, 15, was on the other end, in central North Carolina, at the kitchen table with a glass of water and a tired voice and a copy of the Friday script open in front of her on the placemat. The conversation was 4 minutes again. Algebra 2 had gone well. Britta thought she would get a B+ on the quiz, which she was annoyed about but understood. The school play was Friday. The second page of her speaking part had clicked finally on the third read. The weather in central North Carolina was warm. The dog was on the kitchen floor. The dog said hello. Britta narrated the dog's hello for her mother. Good night, Mom. I love you. I love you, sweetheart. Sleep. The line clicked off on Britta's end. Lindqvist held the SAT phone at her left ear for 1 beat longer. The map light at the back of the tent threw a soft green wash across the planning map. She did not look at the planning map. She looked at the wall of the tent. She breathed a 3 count. Then she said, very quietly, into the deadline, the 3-word sign-off that had been Master Sergeant Soren Bjornstad's on every brief he had ever closed for her. The line he had said at the end of the skiff brief in late October, 2023. The line he had said before he picked up his rifle and walked into the spruce line for the last time. Stay sharp, ma'am. The line was for Frame. It was not for Britta. Britta had already hung up. The line was for the back of the tent at 2300 in eastern Latvia in the current year, and for the brunette officer who ran the network. She set down the sat phone. She closed her contractor notebook. She crossed her arms at the elbows. Watch face inside the wrist. Weight even through both feet. Outside the tent, the wind off the spruce line picked up again at a steady 8 knots. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.